When you trust in God, even evil can become an instrument for good. Juan, to begin with, was one of those men who always greeted you with a smile, even if their hands were full of dirt. He was simple, with his straw hat and his shirt patched up, but what was left of him was faith. Since he was a child, his grandfather taught him to work the field and to trust in God for everything. And Juan, for nothing in the world, missed Mass, those meetings where God was spoken with devotion. That day is to give thanks, he always said. Now Jonas, his neighbor, was another story. He'd also grown up in the field, but when he was young, he decided to go to the city to study. He came back with modern ideas and an air of superiority that he could not hide. The study is what gets you ahead, he said every time he could, as if that made him better than the others. And of course, he went to church, but only when it suited him or when he felt he was in trouble. Despite their differences, they got along well. They greeted each other, talked about the weather and crops, and even made jokes from time to time. But as always, life had prepared a surprise for them that would test their character. One day, without warning, disaster came to the village. First, it was a plague that ravaged the crops, and then a plague that ended the animals. What used to be green fields became a desolate landscape. The two neighbors were affected, but Juan took the worst part. He was practically left with empty hands. When Jonas went to visit Juan, he found him working under the sun with what little he had left. "Neighbor, how are you doing to continue?" Jonas asked, genuinely surprised. "Look at your field. There is almost nothing. I at least saved a part with what I learned at the university. But you?" Juan dried his sweat with a handkerchief and replied calmly, "As long as you have life, there is hope. Neighbor, it is not about how much you lose, but how much you trust. God always provides." Jonas did not know what to say, although he secretly admired him. Something inside him did not accept that one was still so optimistic. How can you trust God so much if everything is so bad for him?" he thought as he said goodbye. For his part, Jonas was determined to get up quickly. Thanks to what he had studied, he managed to save part of his cattle and some herds. But he stopped going to church, saying he did not have time for those things. Weeks passed, and the neighbors stopped visiting. Each one was busy in his own world. Juan, with his unbreakable faith, worked hard every day and did not miss Mass. Jonas, on the other hand, locked himself in his field and became more bitter with each passing day. One day, when Jonas' field began to recover, he decided to visit Juan. However, what he saw left him speechless. Juan's embryos were green. The thorns shone in the sun, and the animals ran happily through meadows. But how?" Jonas murmured as he approached. "Neighbor, this is impossible." Juan received him with his typical smile, sitting under a tree. "What's impossible, neighbor?" Juan asked. It's just hard work and the help from above." Jonas, still disbelieving, insisted. It can't be just that. I also work. And look, I'm barely recovering." Juan looked at him patiently, as if he were talking to a child. Maybe what you lack, neighbor, is not in your hands, but in your heart." Jonas felt offended, but did not show it. He pretended to be in a hurry and left. However, that night he could not sleep. Juan's words echoed in his head. In the heart. What did that mean? Why, with all his knowledge, could he not surpass his neighbor? Thus, over time, Jonas' admiration for Juan turned into something darker. Envy began to grow like a weed in his soul. He could not accept that that simple man, full of faith, was above him, and that envy would lead him to make decisions that would change his life forever. Jonas' envy did not leave him alone. Every time he saw Juan's fields, green and his animals growing healthy, he felt a fire in his chest. One night, unable to stand it anymore, he went out to the field. He looked at the starry sky, clenched his fists and shouted, "If God does not hear me, let anyone else hear me. I am willing to do anything to surpass that man." The wind blew hard, extinguishing the few lights that shone in his house. A shadow appeared among the trees, and a tall and dark figure emerged out of nowhere. His eyes shone like embers, and his voice was a deep echo. Dash, did you call me Jonas? Said the figure with a malicious smile. Jonas took a step back, frightened. Dash, who are you? He asked, although deep down he already knew the answer. Dash, call me whatever you want. The devil, or just someone who can fulfill your wishes. Know what you want. Surpass your neighbor. Let your fields be the best. Let your cattle be the fattest and your house the biggest. I can give you all that, but at a price. Jonas swallowed saliva, nervous but intrigued. Dash, what price? He asked. Dash, you will renounce the god of Wan, and when your time comes, your soul will be mine, said the devil, with a smile that showed his sharp teeth. Jonas hesitated for a moment, but the desire for revenge and power was stronger. Dash, I accept, he exclaimed, extending his hand. The devil shrugged it off, and in that instant, everything changed. Jonas' fields were filled with life. Fruit trees magically sprouted, and his humble house became a mansion worthy of a king. Dash, anything else? Asked the devil, as if he were offering a last gift. Jonas smiled, with a spark of malice in his eyes. Dash, I want one's fields to dry completely. The devil frowned, but he fulfilled his wish. With a gesture, the green of Wan's lands disappeared, leaving only an arid and dead landscape. Dash, there you go, Jonas. But remember, do not forget our deal, said the devil, before disappearing into the shadows. The next morning, Wan went out to his lands and saw the disaster. Where there was life before, now there was desolation. Instead of despairing, he knelt on the dry ground, raised his hands to the sky, and cried, Dash, Lord, I do not understand why you allow this, but I trust you. Give me strength to move on. Meanwhile, Jonas observed everything from afar, hidden behind a tree, with a smile of triumph on his face. Dash, that fool thinks God will save him, he laughed himself. However, despite his victory, Jonas did not feel satisfied. His envy did not disappear, and the desire to see Wan humiliated consumed him more and more. The idea of simply winning him was not enough. He wanted Wan to lose everything, including his faith. One night, feeling that he needed more power, Jonas summoned the devil again. Dash, what do you want now? The devil asked, appearing with air of impatience. Dash, I want absolute power. I want to change whatever I want with my own hands, without having to call you every time. The devil looked at him with a twisted smile. Dash, I will grant to you, but listen carefully. If you ever lose control of your temperament, everything you have will crumble, and I will come for you. Jonas, blinded by ambition, accepted immediately. Now, with his new power, he decided to play with Wan. He transformed the arid lands of his neighbor into a green and flourishing paradise. Thinking that this would confuse him, when Wan saw the miracle, he knelt down again. Dash, thank you, Lord, for your generosity. I do not know how this happened, but I know that it is your work. From his hiding place, Jonas squeezed his fist with fury. Dash, that idiot believed that it was his God. It was my power. Every time one asked for something, Jonas granted it with malice. More carts, a larger shed, even a jar of fresh water when Wan was thirsty. But with each act, without realizing it, Jonas was fulfilling the desires of God. One Sunday, disguised as a rich man, Jonas went to church to spy on Wan. During Mass, he heard his neighbor pray, Dash, Lord, thank you for listening to my supplications. Thank you for using even those who do not believe in you to fulfill your purposes. Everything that happens, good or bad, is in your hands. Those words struck Jonas like lightning. Suddenly, he understood that, in his attempt to destroy Wan, he had been working for the god he despised so much. His rage exploded like a volcano. Dash, no, this can't be, he shouted, running out of the church. As he ran, a shadow appeared before him. It was the devil with a cold smile. Dash, Jonas, you broke the deal. Your rage has betrayed you. Before he could respond, a shadow enveloped him, and Jonas disappeared, leaving only the echo of a cry in the wind. One never knew what had happened to Jonas. All he knew was that his life had changed for the better. His fields flourished, his family lived in peace, and his faith remained unbreakable. Dash, when you trust in God, said one to his children, Dash, even evil can become an instrument for good. And so, faith and humility triumphed. leaving a lesson that neither time nor generations will forget.